I've got news. I've got really big news. You ready for some really big news? Well, okay, I've been doing radio shows at WKCR for thousands and thousands of years. Some of you may have known me from way back when, maybe got a few newer fans since the podcast. I'm sure the podcast is the offspring, believe it or not, of COVID. It was the fact that we got the studios shut down on us that inspired me and allowed me the time to create this podcast that you are listening to right now. Last night, okay, it's July of 2022. Last night was the first time since March of 2020 that I set foot in the studios of WKCR. What this means is that we're going to start up doing live shows again. So you can, I don't know if you know this, every one of these podcasts that you've listened to, Deep Focus, was recorded on a Monday night between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. in Morningside Heights in New York City, Columbia University. And that is the origin of the show. If you don't know WKCR, 89.9 FM, it's a great radio show. Tons of cool things going on there that you should listen to and find out about. You can find it at WKCR.org. And yeah, you can start listening to Deep Focus live Monday night, 6 to 9 p.m. I'm on every other Monday. And when I'm not there, there's still some terrific programming going on. So don't be shy. Tune on in. And you can listen anytime. You'll hear something that you're not going to hear on any other radio station. But yeah, starting on Monday, August 8th, 2022, we'll be back in the studio planning a live Deep Focus for that night. So let the kids know. Okay, this is part 2 of a program from 2015, August 17th, a Monday night from 6 to 9 p.m. Melvin Gibbs came by the studio and we got into it on Ornette Coleman. And if you haven't heard part 1, I'm going to recommend you listen to part 1 first. But either way, coming at you right here with part 2. It's Deep Focus. I'm your host, Mitch Goldman.
For a long period of time without absorbing the thought process behind what makes it work. But that particular combination of, sort of human kindness and exploratory thought it was rare even for the 60s and 70s. It was rare.
Yeah. I mean, you could even think of Ornette presaging a lot of those things that happen. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people you could point to going, you could see this whole movement kind of came out of this guy's thinking. There are probably other people who you could say that of, but you could definitely say that of Ornette.
Yes, for sure. Many different movements, from Carl Berger talking about it was basically Ornette was the one who suggested he go start CMS and, and so.
And that somebody like Carl, who actually, I need to get him back here. He's done a couple of these with me. The last one about Don Cherry that was fantastic, but we really should do one about Ornette too. And the fact that he turned his life 180 degrees after encountering this music. He was like,
that's the effect. That's the kind of effect that,
from like a continent away, back before any of this media stuff existed, he saw the light.
Yeah.
He and Ingrid both.
Yeah.
And they just dropped everything, just walked away and dove in with Don Cherry and then with Ornette.
Yeah. And now people, the question is, in this era, what are people going to dedicate? Are people going to dedicate themselves to creativity in that way? Or are they going to dedicate themselves into other ways of, controlling the universe or whatever? So that's kind of, for me, what gets lost, what got, the major loss, because I don't necessarily feel, the loss of him as a creative force so much, because I don't want to say I got it because I didn't get it. Shannon didn't get it. Blood didn't get it. I mean, they have their own thing. You are who you are. And I don't want to minimize the loss of him to the culture. But I think there's a certain way of thinking about the world that is really, I wish there was space for it. And I feel that that's, of all the other things that I think about, his passing, that, like I said before, that combination of the human kindness and the creativity. Because now creativity is all about, how much money you can make, or how famous you can be, or, how much did your painting sell for, or, what did your IPO go for? And there's nothing that's like representing that, okay, you can be different just because you're different, and it doesn't, yeah, I'm black, but I kind of happen to be black. This is the culture I grew up with, and this culture that you guys kind of half value is, is really incredible, and I'm not going to beat you over the head with it. I'm just going to do this, and you're going to respect it just because it exists. I mean, there's nobody that, I can't see any parallel to that right now.
You're listening to WKCR. I'm Mitch Goldman. Melvin Gibbs is our guest tonight, and we're talking about Ornette Coleman and the unfathomable loss, and the music endures. It's still with us, which is, I hope there's some solace for us in that.
Yeah, I sure do.
We are specifically listening to some recordings from 1978 when the group Primetime actually came together a few years before this, but I haven't found any recordings of any live performances from the first few years that the band existed, and then a bunch from 1978. And maybe you could tell a little bit about what you know about how this band did come together and how they... Because, I mean, I listen to this music, and one of the things I've gotten from it is this doesn't just happen. There's a huge amount of work that's been done to arrive at this place.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to answer that question for real, you should get somebody like Blood or Burn or Charlie, or one of the guys who was actually in the band. I mean, what I know is that, as Donardo said, there were always people coming in and out, and he always had, people on the floor, and Blood was living with him for a while. Shannon lived. The guys lived there. And that is part of why the thing had this sort of weird personality that it has, because there was that level of empathy of like you're living with somebody. And the Sunrise Band is the same way. It's got this thing that transcends the idea of rehearsing. It's just this substance that lives. And I believe, as you said, Blow was the first one up in there, and there was somebody else before Shannon. I can't remember. I think, if I remember, Byrne came in Byrne was at Berkeley. Believe it or not, Byrne is a Berkeley student. Yes, Mr. Byrne next. And
it all makes sense in a whole new way now.
And Byrne moved to New York from Toledo, Ohio, and he got the intro, and Ornette liked his playing and got him in the band. And I guess Jamal told me, this isn't Jamal. Like I said, I don't really know the Fred's history. If you're out there, please call in, Fred. we'll give you the mic. But I know that Ornette was really into having a parallel band to what Miles was doing. So
really? That's interesting. I was wondering about that.
And he reached out to Reggie Lucas and Entombé.
Huh. Ornette did.
Ornette did. And
wow.
I can't remember if it was Reggie or Entombé that gave him Jamal's number.
That's really interesting.
I think it was Reggie that gave him the number. And then I guess Jamal brought the rest of the Philly guys in,
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's, I don't really know anything about any relationship between the two of them. I mean, it's kind of an obvious comparison in a way of leading this electric group, but I wonder what aspect of all that he was looking for, because this doesn't really sound at all like what Miles
I don't think he
was
was looking to have his band sound like Miles. He was looking for a pool of musicians who understood the language, that were open to the idea of the way he wanted to hear that music, you know. I mean, he would have just hired Miles' band, right? if he wanted to do that, he wanted somebody, you know. So that's he went and got the recommendations from those guys of who the different guys are, and I guess Jamal was the most different. I guess so that's.
By the way, you know, another area of overlap here. You know that in 8 minutes, Stevie Wonder's doing a free performance in Central Park?
No, I did not know that.
Now you know.
Okay. Has this been announced, or is this like an instant?
Not really.
This is an instant concert?
It's an instant concert. That's what I hear. I mean...
Where? At the band show where the...
I guess so, yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
I heard it today, and from a source that I believe that...
that just means it's going to be... Well, this is what Twitter is for, you know.
Yeah.
I'll have to check Twitter afterwards to see, on the break, to see what the report is, because it just seems like that's just going to be a madhouse. I mean, even though, you know, it's like they didn't let the police know, you know, it's good.
No. I'm sure they totally covered that. I think they gave away tickets, free tickets, but it is like a ticketed event. Oh, yeah. But I think that just happened this afternoon.
Well, you know, I mean, it's like you're going to hear the concert in the park. You don't have to be, right. You know, it's like you don't. I mean, it would be great to actually be in there and see him up close. But if you just want to hear the music, I mean, we used to do that back in the day.
Yes, we did.
You know?
Sit up on those rocks.
Yeah.
Well, there's another connection there between Stevie and Miles that we'll talk about another day. But these things do overlap.
They do overlap.
You know, another thing, maybe we should hear some more music and then we could talk about this. I wanted to draw you out about that. This music is utterly distinct, as we've said, in any number of different ways. But one thing, Ronald Shannon Jackson, who's the drummer here with Ornette Coleman. Now, Ornette was a young man at this time, but he'd already been playing with Ornette for 10 years or so. And I didn't really calculate that, but somewhere in there, since he was a kid. Shannon was known to people who were really into the music for playing with Cecil Taylor, which was around this time or a bit earlier, with Albert Ayler 10 years before. But he emerges as a voice in this band. All the sidemen emerge. Their voices come to the fore in this band, really together. But this music would not sound like it sounds without Shannon playing drums. And you know his playing maybe better than anybody.
Yeah.
You could cogitate on that a little bit. We could play some of this next set or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, let's play some more and then we'll cogitate.
Okay. So this is a thrill. I mean, just unearthing this music and finding these astonishing recordings. I can't remember if we said this on the air tonight or not, but this band really only released 2 recordings while it was in this early version of the band. And we did say that a little bit, Dancing in Your Head and Body Meta. The last gig that both Shannon and Blood did with Ornette was Saturday Night Live in April of '79. Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember. Milton Berle was the host, and
yes,
he made some really kind of, borderline offensive joke about the music right before they played. I remember that.
He made a bunch of embarrassing, wildly have you ever watched this show? Do you know who your audience is? Totally off base kind of comments, which apparently embarrassed Lorne Michaels to the point that he said, "Yeah, let's just put that one on the back shelf and hide it." But that's another thing that's shown up on YouTube. It is out to the world, although the reruns, it didn't play in circulate with all the other stuff from that era. But that was the last gig those guys did with him. And so there were other recordings after that. But so we're listening to these live recordings of this group, and it's just utterly distinct. And so we are going to hear next from the same band from actually a little bit earlier. It was May of that year at the North Sea Jazz Festival. And so once again, it's Ornette Coleman and the group we came to know as Primetime Bern Nix and James Blood Ulmer on guitars, Fred Williams on the bass, Ronald, Shannon Jackson, and Ornette Coleman playing drums. And we're off to North Sea, WKCR.
Tot zover even het turbulente optreden van het sextet van Ornette Coleman. U hoorde 2 stukken, Song X en Mukami.
How is your Dutch? Yes, well, let me step back for a moment, take the big broad view, and tell you you're listening to WKCR. I'm Mitch Goldman. We call this show Deep Focus, and our subject is Ornette Coleman, and our guest tonight, Melvin Gibbs, and more specifically, we're focusing on this era of 1978, and we've got these magnificent live recordings, and great thanks to Dutch Radio for doing this recording and
Dutch radio
exist. Yeah,
Dutch radio is the greatest. I love Dutch radio. The sound is always amazing on the thing. For some reason, being in Amsterdam always makes everybody really happy.
Yeah, for some reason.
So you always get
one of two reasons.
You always get people always do really great shows there.
Yes, great audiences too.
Yeah, great audiences. Den Haag, the same thing. Rotterdam, whatever. It's like Holland's just one of the places that it's a great place for music. And
yeah, you're lucky. You got a tour schedule. You're like,
yes, yeah.
Oh, day off in Amsterdam. What? New Orleans.
Yeah.
Certain spots that just have radiate kind of energy. And so this is, North Sea Jazz Festival 1978. And I was, one thing we were talking about off mic, how wildly different the feel of was this piece compared to the earlier one that we heard. This at a big festival, the other one in this very proper German kind of castle. And which acoustically had to be a nightmare at that previous set.
I'm sure they were hating it on stage.
But, that's another thing about this, that you can impart some wisdom to our audience. And I'm sure it was even more true in 1978 that this was uncharted territory for the tech crews at all these places. They're used to, they know how to mic and mix rock and roll. They know how to do a classical recording. You come along with this, and it's just uncharted land.
Yeah, you just reminded me of a story that's kind of off topic to that, but I remember the first time I took my own band, it was actually the second time I took my own band to Europe. The show itself was pretty terrible, I have to admit, but it's bad when you do your worst show. I was the 2 worst shows in my life that I've done on my own. That was one of them, and the other one was the show that I did where when I first started doing the band, I was called Liberation Theology, where I had all the Cuban guys and the Cuban religious group and a horn section, and literally nobody showed up. There were like 3 of us, and there should have been like 12. And that was the night that David Byrne decided to come. And I was like, oh, life is cruel, Anyway, that the gig in Groningen sticks out of my mind, in addition to the fact that it sucked so much, was that I had Jason in the band, DJ Logic, and I requested 2 turntables and a mixer, and they literally bought 2 turntables from somebody's house and a mixing board. That would never happen now. They'd have Serato, it's not an
unknown quantity.
People know what it is now, but that's what it was. And I'm sure it was the same thing for them back with this crazy music. You got all of the slow end going on, and the European hole's not designed for it.
Right, that's a factor too.
So I'm sure it was a night from the sound man, and it was a nightmare. Having said that, once again,
but
in Holland,
the recording's really good.
Holland, they know what to do. Holland and Switzerland, man, they got the sound is always on point in those 2 places.
The sound is always on point. It's funny, there are you could graph the 2 axes, one being technical proficiency and the other being disposition. There are places you can go where they'll get the sound right, but you're not going to have a lot of fun while they're doing it.
Yeah.
But I would say out of all the places that I ever was on tour, Netherlands had both of those needles pinned.
Yeah, it's always kind of like, it's always a good time. It's like you can't go tour of that country and not come out feeling like, yeah, okay, I can do this again. Some other places you go, it's like, this is a good thing they pay me because I never come here. But Netherlands is not like that.
No. And I think, I guess every band is subjected to those experiences. And, how was the meal that you had and how much sleep did you get the night before? You really can't tell with these guys, quite honestly. I know, and this is something else you could talk about, Shannon Jackson in particular is playing drums on this. It really didn't matter what else was going on. You might get an earful about something or other, but when he was on stage, I think the whole universe disappeared before the music.
Well, that was a 70s thing, too. And I still kind of hold to that aesthetic. I mean, it's like you're supposed to leave it all on stage. You go up there, you give 100%, and that's why you're there. I mean, the whole kind of like the diva thing, it's like that was unacceptable in that era. You had to like just go and do it. Now it's kind of like, oh, I don't know,
and there were no small gigs. There were no unimportant gigs.
Yeah, every gig is important. I mean, I always tell people the first defunct gig, there wasn't maximum 20 people at that gig, and the next gig there was 1,000. I mean, it grew that quick. You cannot take any gig as unimportant, because you don't, things can be exponential.
And why do it?
Yeah. Well,
why, if you're not going to bring it?
Yeah. I mean,
why leave the house?
Yeah, I mean that's the tradition I grew up in. If you're going to play, play. If you're not going to play, then don't play.
Sit on the porch.
Yeah, but if you're going to play, play, because that's what you do. And you do it 100%.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from the that North Sea performance recording? Any?
I just really liked the band interplay was really, really interesting. Like the way the guys were playing with each other, and the combination was, it was this weird. I mean, it has the everybody's young, everybody's macho thing in it, but it also has this sort of real, like, okay, they're like the Green Berets or something. They're like the Delta Force. They like hit the, it's like clear, they're like checking the exits, okay, now we're going in,
hand signals.
Exactly. It's like
eyes cutting.
Everything's moving quick and everybody's got everybody else covered. It's just really interesting in that way.
And these are some big personalities.
Yeah.
These are characters.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Something you touched on, I don't know if it's something we can unpack here, but how he selects these guys. And how Ornette intuited that this is somebody I can work with and I can pull something from. But whether they were like this before they started playing with him or they became like this in the process of playing with Ornette, they strike me as these like outsized characters, and the experience I had with these guys individually bears that out, each in their own way.
I think that, it's a thing that you recognize a personality in a person. I mean, the thing from our era is the story of, Shannon and Vernon, and me bringing Vernon to the gig, and Shannon literally, without hearing a note that Vernon played, was like, bring this kid to rehearsal, I'm like, you don't want, and my question was, you don't want him to audition first? He's like, no, just bring him.
Drama ensued.
Yeah, so it's like, it's a thing that you carry around with you. I mean, the thing that I remember from that is doing a gig with Vernon. I remember Nikki, whose name I can't remember. Maybe her last name is Gillespie, the drummer who played with Beyonce.
Oh, yeah, Nikki Gillespie.
I remember we were doing a gig at the Tonic when it was open, and she walked in, and I just looked at her. I was like, oh, this is going to be real bad for somebody.
I was there.
The drummers are going to be hating it in a little while.
She was playing with Fuse.
Yes, she was.
And I remember a drummer who I won't name.
Yeah.
I didn't say, she's unbelievable, that drummer. I just said, hey, what do you think of that set? I was like, well, what do you think? And he was like, well, she's, he like started like immediately like backpedaling from his set and like kind of breaking her down a little bit. Totally off his game.
Yeah, no, she just walked in. She walked in holding the sticks, and it was like, okay, it's a wrap. You know, she just had that thing, like you knew.
Yeah, and she did, and she had it.
Yeah.
I mean, and still has it, I'm sure. But yeah, she was. She lit a fire under Fuse that night, and he's got asbestos pants on most of the time.
Exactly. He was like, ah. Yeah, so I mean, you know, and Shannon's that kind of guy. Definitely Blood's that kind of guy. You know, you look at him, you know, he carries the thing with him. You know,
Yeah.
and that's part of it, carrying it, and that's also from that era too. You know, thinking about, you know, having to be, you know, thinking about who you had to be at that time. You know, it's kind of like I always think back to the first Black Rock Coalition meeting, and the one thing that really bothered me at the time was Greg Tate had come up with this manifesto, and part of the manifesto was, "We reserve the right to be mediocre." I was like, "What the hell do you mean?" No, that ain't me. But what he actually meant was, you know, it should be, we should be able to be normal. You know, it's like my kid now. It's like, okay, my kid shouldn't have to be an exemplar to prove a point to everybody. But those guys from the era where you didn't have a choice. You had to be an exemplar.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah.
So that's, and you hear it in the music, you know. So, I mean, it's interesting now that we're in the Obama era and you don't have to be an exemplar. I mean, to a certain, you know, it's more, you have more of a right to be mediocre than you did when, you know, back then. You don't have 100% right. It'd be interesting to see, you know, how personalities progress and how music progress, and if you still, where the big personalities are going to come from, you know.
Boy, that's a great question. You are, take this moment to do a little station ID. You're listening to WKCR. We are WKCR FM New York and WKCR HD1, or perhaps you're listening to WKCR.org, or maybe you're listening to WKCR, some other thing that I don't even know what it is. But the program's called Deep Focus. Melvin Gibbs is our guest, and the subject of our focus is Ornette Coleman, and specifically European performances, 1978, and the early version of the band Primetime. And I put it to you a little earlier to unpack some of the magic that's happening in the percussive end of this group and what Ronald Shannon Jackson was bringing, and maybe some of the experience you had in your years on stage with him.
Okay, I'll give you some. But first, for those of you listening in high def, I did a little extra lip smacking. You can go back and listen in your right headphone, and you can find it afterwards. Little treasure for you. Yeah, Shannon, I mean, the thing about Shannon was he's from the same town Ornette is from, Fort Worth, and he brings a particular set of rhythms that they grew up on.
Although they didn't meet there.
No, they did not meet there. But he brings a particular tradition of playing that was, you know, particular to that part of the world, really. Mm-hmm. And coming out of the marching band traditions of their town and the different rhythms the different dance rhythms that they used to play in there. And I always found that to be really interesting, his rhythms, because he would show me some rhythm that would be like, and he would say, okay, this is a rhythm that, you know, my aunt danced to, and you hear some rhythm, you're like, what the heck? And she danced to that, you know? So it's, you know, I'm sure that's part of the reason that Ornette picked him, because a lot of the things that we think are sort of quirky and aesthetically left field about Ornette are probably things that were the local traditions, you know, things that people local sort of like, you know, what's the word in semiotics? The local musical iconography, you know, that particular rhythmic figures, particular melodic figures, and for me, that's always interesting, because Texas is kind of another country. They do want to be their own country, and musically they are. There's so much music coming out of Texas that the rest of us never hear, And what Shannon did with those rhythms and stuff is what's really unique. And, he's been gone, a little while now, and there's no, I know one other person that I play with, the drummer David Pleasant, who builds off the traditions off the part of America where my dad came from, who's dug down into the traditional stuff and built out a whole system out of it. But I can't think of any other drummer who's taken the local thing of their community and kind of built it out the way that Shannon did. And then added, the African traditions on top of it. He went and spent time in Cameroon, learning from the traditional guys there. We used to talk about rhythmic stuff all the time. We would exchange records and stuff, because I was a big collector of African traditional music during the time I was in the Decoding Society. And he built all of that in, and he built in this, what Vernon used to call, what me and Vernon used to call rhythmolodics as opposed to harmolodics. Like how you take a rhythm and modulate it the same way you would modulate a harmony. And it's interesting to go back to the Reggie Lucas and Antume thing, because that is one of the things that Miles's band did. They had this weird sort of rhythmic, cellular rhythmic thing that they used to work that was very interesting, that is sort of a parallel to what Shannon does. With what you hear with that, and that last thing we heard, you hear a lot, there's a lot of that going on, where you hear a lot of multiple rhythmic cells, like Shannon is playing a certain cell, Donardo's playing a certain cell, Byrne is responding to that cell, and then Blood will do something that'll be a kind of commentary, and then the bass is kind of weaving through all the four different things that the four different guys that are setting that thing up, and then you have Ornette on top of it. So it's a really interesting as a theory and as applied, the way what Shannon does, taking those kind of real propulsive marching band-esque rhythms and building it, and then how he would take those propulsive rhythms and break them down into something that sounded like, Grandma got hit by the Holy Ghost or whatever. He just really had a really great combination of elements with that. It's you can hear certain, obviously you can hear Max in there, you can hear other people in there, but he had a certain very particular thing that's also gone now.
And even if you're not getting all that on the level of detail that you just brought to it, anybody who listens to this station regularly, let's say, is going to hear this music that we're playing, and they're going to know right away you're in some other territory than conventional swing approach to drumming, which Shannon could do all day long if he wanted to. If he wanted to play some backbeat blues, he could lay that groove down tighter than anybody. But you're in his concept now, and the whole band is, and it's moving that way that won't with anybody else. Yeah,
one thing I wanted to throw in while I was at it, you were talking about the strong personalities and who came out of that. Shannon told me that Ornette was the one who actually encouraged him to pick up the flute and start writing the melodies down and all of that, So Ornette was directly responsible for that. So he was, not only was he a great band leader, he was also like, okay, you can do this.
Yeah.
Go ahead and do it,
Yeah.
And again, that's the same thing Shannon did for Vernon. It was like, okay, dude, come on, man. When you're going to, do what you want to do. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about with the continuums, is,
Even though it's going to tear my band apart.
Yeah. But it's time for you to do your thing,
And Shannon was already in his mid-30s when he started playing with Ornette. It wasn't like, he was emerging into himself for the first time.
No, it wasn't. And he'd already, he'd already been with Eiler, and as Shannon told me, basically, Train supported that band. Train used to he told me that Train would come pay the band after the shows, if they were playing somewhere, and there was, that's the level of.
and drive them home in his station
wagon and all of that, you know. So it's kind of like that's the level of person. And he had played with Mingus, and I mean, he'd already had like a real career that, you know, most people wouldn't have had. And then, but yet he kind of went back and rebuilt and did this. Okay, I'm going to go stay at Ornette's house, and I'm going to learn this whole other way of doing things. And the result was, you know, what it was. You know, to have that courage to rebuild.
Course,
I mean, great guys do that. I mean, I love the story. I mean, not, you know, it's in a way it's a shame to keep bringing up Miles in context of Ornette, but I have to think that part of this was what Miles did was inspired by the new things that Ornette brought to the music. You know, I mean, he went and got, when Ornette started doing what Ornette was doing, Miles basically reconstituted his band, and he went and got Herbie and Wayne and, you know, Ron Carter and Tony Williams, and he brought this whole new musical thing in, and basically he had to relearn how to play with his band, because the band had this whole, you know, the music that the band was playing out of the stuff that Ornette was doing, as well as everything else that was happening at the time. So what Miles did was he basically let them rehearse by themselves for a week. Then he came in and he learned how to play to them, as opposed to like, okay, I got some new music and you kids are going to play my music. And I think
they were kids.
Yeah.
They really were kids.
And I think it was the same, you know, it was a similar thing with Shannon. Shannon took what he did and broke it down to go do this thing with Ornette. And, you know, it was valuable for both of them.
I'm taking it all in.
Taking it in. So what you got in your hand there?
Well, a matter of fact, another little prize from the KCR archives. And we were talking about this group playing a variety of venues, and it's really true. We heard them in a German castle. We heard them at a contemporary jazz festival. Now we're going to hear them in kind of a rock club, the Quartier Latin in Berlin, West Berlin.
I remember that. I remember I was there once when I didn't go, actually, but I remember when Prince played there.
Are you thinking of Quartier Latin or the Quasimodo?
No, he played Quartier Latin.
He did? Because I know he also played the Quasimodo, which was right nearby.
Yeah, because it was Quasimodo is a little place in the basement, right?
Is it? Are they actually in the same property?
No.
Oh, yeah, right. But, Quasimodo, yeah.
Yeah, that's the down. No, he played in the bigger.
Oh, okay, yeah. But it still wasn't a huge venue, right?
No, it wasn't huge, but Quasimodo was like.
Nah, Quasimodo wasn't that tiny. It wasn't.
Compared to what?
Yeah. No, I remember it being.
Compared to Vanguard, it's not, but, you know.
I don't know, off the top of my head, maybe.
Remember, you're talking to a rock and roller now.
Right, small by that standard, yes. Off the top of my head, maybe like. Maybe a little smaller than Tonic.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But Quartier Latin is like a 1,200, I think. It was
okay.
Yeah,
I didn't realize it was that big.
It was a pretty big place.
But well, it's definitely a different vibe venue. Berlin. How about West Berlin in the 70s?
Oh, that was a spot, man. Yeah, we loved West Berlin. Well, I didn't go in the 70s. First time I went was 81. But you know, I have affection in my heart for West Berlin. I mean, I like the New Berlin. But it was a lot of fun when it was two countries.
You want to just shine a little light on that?
Well, you know, Berlin was like, it was off in its own little universe over there.
It was, you had to go through or over East Germany, like for hours, and you're behind the Iron Curtain till you landed in West Berlin, which was this kind of outpost.
Yes.
I mean, literally, you're like, you're on the other side now.
You're way deep in the other side, and they got the fences and the dogs, and you ain't leaving. And I think the fact that you ain't leaving put the people in the permanent party mode.
Yeah. Yeah, it had a kind of frontier mentality.
Yeah. It was definitely, you know, don't stop till you drop there. So, and I enjoyed, you know, every time I went there, I enjoyed it because of that. I don't, you know, who knows if I could have survived.
Not in that Amsterdam way. It's a different kind of.
Yeah, it's different, but you know, yeah. But it was, and then in those days, it was a really great music scene. You know.
Yeah, Another place, always great audiences.
Yes, always great.
So there we are in Berlin. It's July 4th. Are you glad to be not in America? 1978. And it's actually listed as Bern Nix and Charlie Ellerby. I think it's still Blood Omer on guitar here. You'll confirm for us. And the bassist is listed as Albert Arnold, which is not a familiar name to me. You'll, again, tell us if it's...
I have no idea. That might... Albert, if you actually exist and you're out there, please call in.
That's right. Or it's our man Fred again, more likely. But
yeah, but it's one of those things. It's like, I'm actually going to have to call Jamal after this and find out who actually did that tour. Yeah.
Well, it's also the dates are far enough apart too. They could have been different legs. It could have been somebody's available to do this one and not that one. So, yeah, we don't have full scholarship on this. But in any case, the core of the band and the sound of the band, you'll recognize. And again, it's Ronald, Shannon Jackson, and Donardo Coleman on drums. And not to overlook Donardo's contribution here because, I can't help referring to Shannon sitting here with you, Melvin. But Donardo's got his own thing that he brings to this. And
Donardo's doesn't not, I love Donardo's playing. It's kind of like I don't feel like he gets enough respect as a musician.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
It's he does his own thing in his own way, and I'm always interested in it. So whoever doesn't like it, y'all can go jump in the lake. Quote me on that.
And the ensuing 2 decades or whatever it was bears out 2 decades plus, 3 decades plus bears out. His contribution and creativity and originality and time and everything else. So, but this particular period, 1978, Shannon's still present on drums. And Shannon's the kind of guy that if he's present, you're going to know.
For sure.
And so, yeah, let's, we're going to, I tell you, Melvin, this is the last show I do with this engineer. I'm firing this guy.
That guy, he's
terrible.
I don't know. It's a union house, though. You're going to have to go through.
You're
going to have to follow the protocol and get rid of him.
Yes. I got to write a letter about this. All right. So, off to Berlin in the WKCR Jetpacks. You're listening to Deep Focus. I'm Mitch Goldman. Melvin Gibbs is our guest. And here's some music from Ornette Coleman that, unless you were listening when I played this a couple of weeks ago, you've never heard. Live from 1978 on WKCR. That's the stuff. That's that Ornette juice that we love that brings us back every time. Oh, man. The date, August 17th, 2015. Melvin Gibbs in the studio with me at Deep Focus on the topic of Ornette Coleman. And that's part 2 of 3. I told you about the fact that we're going to be back in the studio going live. Have you subscribed to this Deep Focus yet? If you don't see it, we are Small Media Large. That's who you'll see as the hosting company. Come on along. Get on board with that. Tell us if you like it. Tell us if you don't like it. Did I tell you about, you can email us if you want. You got something to share about the show. It's deepfocusnow@gmail.com. Deepfocusnow@gmail. And come on along on Instagram. We are deep_focus_ deep_focus_ podcast on Instagram. And we're always putting up new info and photos and cool stuff about it. So, yeah, come find us. All right. Meet me over at part 3. I'll see you there.